Welcome to John Curtis FM FIDE Master Chess, and today I'm going to take you into a journey through time, back to the dark days of the Cold War between the Soviet Union bloc and the United States when President Nixon was in the White House. And we have Bobby Fischer representing the United States, and we have Boris Spassky representing the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of pride on the table as far as Americans were concerned, and the rest of the world that loved the young aspirant Bobby Fischer. Whether you loved him or hated him, you had to admire him, because he himself, all alone, took on the Russian juggernaut. And they had their own psychiatrists, they had their own physical education people working behind the scenes. Their team was bigger, their team of theorists, all to make sure that the Soviet pride was held in this very important match, where the Soviets had held control of the World Chess Championship title for so many years. And it was their national sport, so there's so much pride on the line. Anyway, Bobby Fischer chose an unusual opening in this game too, as we'll see. Let's start the game. D4 by Boris. Boris was white and Bobby was black. Knight F6, C4, E6, Knight F3, C5, D5, and now pawn takes pawn, and D6. And now we have the Benoni defense Knight's Tour, right? It's some people call it an Indian game, an East Indian game. Anyway, but it's also known as the Benoni defense Knight's Tour. Anyway, we'll just see what happens. White develops his minor piece. He puts his knights on bishop 3, on the bishop 3 square, or c3, to complete the development of his minor pieces. And so he's just left with the completion of his kingside pieces and being able to castle. But he's just being very, very wary of black to just see what black's plans are. Black opts to fianchetto his bishop along the long black diagonal. You see that long black diagonal. Okay, and white plays knight to d2. That's the idea of playing knight to c4. Okay, so that's the idea behind that move. Knight to b file to d7. Now, black wants to be able to counter-attack this knight going on c4 by playing knight to b6 possibly. Now, e4. Now we see that white finally develops his white bishop, and he's eyeing these squares here, right? So he's got the white squares controlled, and black, as we know, wants to go for the black squares. And you'll see this very evident in this game. And I always talk about, when I'm analysing these chess games, is I talk about how it's important to choose in the opening whether you're going to go and try to battle for the black squares or the white squares, or both. But predominantly in a lot of games, there's the yin and yang, there's delicate balance to and fro going on between both sides, especially at the highest level. So bishop e2, solid move, and castles for black, and castles for white. They don't waste time protecting their kings, these two guys. There's a whole lot of pride on the line. So rook e8. The Bobby Fischer plans to play rook e8 and attack that pawn. And queen to c2 is played by white to defend the pawn. Now knight h5. And when I saw this, no doubt live, when the whole world was watching it, they were thinking, oh no, Bobby, you're playing Boris Spassky, and you're going to have a busted king side. Is that wise? You know, we know you're a genius, but is that wise to be able to do that? It was just sort of a surprise to the whole chess world when this move was made, because bishop takes knight could be played. And Boris accepted. He played bishop takes knight. And now, when we look at this game, we're looking at it from the average player's perspective. or average decent player's perspective, my perspective, rather than the grandmaster. You might go into a lot of in-depth analysis that members on my Twitch stream or YouTube watchers, it'd be beyond a lot of their comprehension because they can't go into lines too deep. So let's keep things simple. And the point is, in this position, black's got his queen eyeing the king side, and his bishop is eyeing the king side, and the knight could possibly come up and support an attack, and the rook even could do something. So black has got access to the king side, as long as he doesn't lose his pawn and get mated. Anyway, here we go. Right, so white plays knight c4, attacking the d pawn, the pawn on d6 here. This is under attack. This is attack and counter attack in this opening. It's pretty prevalent if you choose to play this line. So knight to e5 is played. Now, Spassky elects to put his knight on e3. Okay, I would have probably taken the knight myself, and then just tried to play maybe pawn to bishop 4 or something like that. But it's probably bad. But I don't know any better than that. Anyway, and a lot of other players would probably do the same thing. Anyway, Bobby plays queen. Yes, queen all the way over to h4 and says, hey, I'm coming over there where your king is. And I mean, that's a very intimidating move by black. But Boris has got ideas that if you attack on the black squares, I'll attack on the white ones. So if you attack on the black squares, I'll attack on the white ones, or vice versa. Anyway, bishop d2, he clears his back rank. As you can see by the bar on the side of the board, white's got an advantage here, slight advantage. And now knight to g4 is played, threatening checkmate. Threatening queen takes pawn, checkmate. So that's a big threat. And bang. I think at this stage, the world champion thought, well, this looks like it might go into a drawish type of game. So in the variation he chooses. So white takes with the pawn, because he wants to undouble the pawns on this file. They're undoubled now. There's still a lot of weaknesses in that position, but it's not easy. There's a lot of space between in that area there, a lot of space controlled by black. Anyway, bishop f4, and it attacks that weak little pawn. Now, a natural move would be maybe bishop to e5, one would think, but no, that probably is a bad move and might be a losing move. So we find that queen to f6 is played, keeping possibilities of h4 and h5, yeah, and also defending the pawn and attacking the bishop. Now, white thinks for some time here, and he knows that he doesn't want this bishop coming in to the attack over near the king. And he also knows if he plays this next move, g3, the white bishop can't come into the attack. So the attack is, the game is between both sides is more focused around those 4 squares there and black square control, particularly of e5, that square there. Anyway, bishop d7. Black finally gets his back rank cleared and prepares the b5 move. And Boris says, no, you're not doing that, buddy. In Russian, of course. And b6 is played with the idea of a6 followed by b5, right, to continue the spread of influence on the queen side. Now, rook to e1's played, and that just simply defends the e pawns. There's no nonsense going on in the middle. Remember, the pressure is all around the centre here. So black again tries to stabilise the centre and play this b5 move. White plays rook e2, knowing that black wants to burst through the centre. And then black plays b5. White elects to play rook to e1, rook on the a file to e1, and protects the pawn. But more importantly, white wants to push the pawn. Okay? And now black plays queen to g6 to prevent the pawn being pushed, because if the pawn's pushed now, black can simply play queen takes queen or bishop to f4, 5, and attack the queen and have a massive game, right? And so white just stabilises the pawn structure on the queen side with b3. And black plays rook e7. White plays queen to d3 to put pressure on the b pawn, right? The b pawn, this pawn here, puts pressure. It's threatened threatened several times. He threatens rook to b8, then he plays rook to b8 and supports that pawn. And that's the right way to play it. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and b4. If you took this pawn off, it'd be a double pawn, and it's probably probably a way to be able to distract black from his attack and pick off those two pawns, because they'd be a bit weak. Okay, so now let's see what transpires. Black pushes the pawn to c4. This square where the queen's threatened is going to become critical towards the end of the game. And we can see that according to the bar on the left-hand side of the board, that black has a big advantage. Queen to d2 is played. Rook to a file to e8 and rook to e3. White probably thinks that he might be able to, he's hoping he might be able to get a draw in this position. And Bobby just expands on the king side, and white moves backwards and forwards. Black moves his king to h7. Later he'll find that king g8 is probably a safer square. And he moves it back to king to g8. Good choice, Bobby, even if I say so myself. Okay, rook to e2. And you're going to see something very unusual here in a minute. You're going to see 4 moves of rook takes e4. Can you see 4 rooks all lined up on the same file? 1, 2, 3, 4. And all of them are going to exchange on that square. Rook takes e4. Okay? All right, so black takes the knight. And what black's working out is that if he takes the bishop, white takes the bishop back, black's calculated really finely in the finest, most detailed possible way that what looks absolutely deadly, that white might even get this move and this move in and checkmating along that diagonal, which would be very powerful when you're playing the world champion. But Bobby's calculated everything like the genius that he is. And we'll see that happen. Rook takes e4. That's 1. Rook takes e4. That's 2. Rook takes e4. That's 3. And rook takes e4. That's 4 times that rook takes e4 move was played in the one game. And now black plays queen takes e4. Okay, so the e4 square was a very critical square indeed. Okay, now let's see what black looks at the position. He says, well, what can I do? If he plays bishop here, with the idea there, black might just give him a check first. Right, so give him a check first, and then check him here, right? And then play bishop here, threatening checkmate. So maybe it's not fast enough. Maybe this line is a bit too slow. So what did the world champion play? Well, the world champion played bishop there. And that threatens checkmate in one move, right? Now, Bobby, who calculated all this, he played queen g6. He says, get your bishop out of there. Now, the bishop goes back to c1. He wants to threaten bishop to b2, right? He wants to threaten that. Now, if any other move is played other than the next move, well then white is too quick, and the position would be a draw at very, very best for black. So what black must be absolutely accurate, and black plays queen to b8, b1 I should say. Okay, the king moves to g7. The king moves to g7, and now king moves to f8. The phone rang, sorry. I apologise for that. The king moves to f1, and the whole point is if the king's on g2 here, he's worried about this bishop coming in and checking him and mating him in some variations. So black plays the bishop up anyway. Now, what white's thinking of is maybe I can escape on the black squares. So he moves his king up again with the idea of running up the board on the black dark squares and trying to, I mean, if he could run up here like that, then there'd be a checkmate down there. So maybe he's just aiming for something like that, okay? Right, so but he's played king e2. Black gives a check, right? It's a very important check too. And white puts the queen in and says, would you like a draw? I don't know whether he asked him whether he didn't want to draw, because, as I say, I'm not sure. I don't know what actually took place, but if I was white, I'd just be happy with the draw in this type of position. Queen to c2 check, and now white has to make a decision as to what he's going to do. So he puts his queen in. He says, well, I'll take a draw. If you want to check back on e4, then if you want to check me back here, then I'll be happy to play queen to e3, and that would be a draw. But no, Bobby plays queen to b3, and he's got this beautiful little tying up variation where he ties white's king up between these squares here and here and here and here, right? So that's the idea of this move here. Okay, he wants to bring his bishop in with effect before white can get these two pieces here and make them effective against the king. You can see white's so far away now from getting a decent checking line or whatever. Okay, and now queen to d4. White's probably thinking this is my last hope, because if I can't play this move and try to check him along that diagonal, I'm dead anyway, so I'm just going to have a go, see what he does. And black plays bishop to d3 check. And when Bobby played that move, that was the end of the game, because Boris Spassky then resigned. If the king was to go back, the queen could attack the bishop, threatening checkmate, right? And queen here, and there'd be a checkmate there, and the bishop would be threatened. And if the bishop was to go there, well, queen checks here, and then the bishop there, and that'd be a checkmate too. So that's one of my favourite games. My favourite because it was the first game that led to Bobby Fischer virtually becoming an immortal, a legend of the game, one of the greatest players that's ever lived, or the greatest player, as many recognise him to be. Even Kasparov once said that Bobby Fischer was the greatest player that ever lived. And I admired Kasparov when he said that. It was very, very decent of him to allude to the fact that, yes, there was a better man than he, as great as Kasparov was. Okay, I'm going to let you go now, and thank you very much for joining me in this stream.